Good morning, Campbell McCreary here, Amvest Capital, New York City. Welcome to the Amvest Capital Inc. live webinar with Signature Resources Limited. Signature trades on the venture as SGU and as SGGTF on the OTCQB. Hope you'll enjoy today's program. It'll be available in replay, on-demand replay about an hour after we wrap up at amvestcapital.com/replays, and it will also you'll get a link to it in an email after we wrap up. And please send in your questions in the question pane of GoToWebinar, and we'll ask them in real time. Amvest, of course, is a New York-based specialist investment management and corporate finance firm focused solely on the natural resource sector. This call is for informational purposes only. Please read this carefully. Presenting today, we have with us Robert Vallis, the president and CEO of Signature, and Paolo Lostrito, who's the chairman. Rob Vallis, actually director, president, CEO, engineer by background, 25 plus years in the industry. Yamana, Barrick were his sort of two big places, but corporate development for most of his years. And Paolo, chairman, is been his whole career on the sell side, and is also an engineer by background, and it's a notable name in the Canadian mining industry. So with that, Rob, if you want to turn on your webcam, and Paolo, if you want, we'll dive in, and we'll meet you on the other side with Q&A.
Thank you, Campbell, and welcome everyone. Good morning.
Good morning.
Signature. I assume I can be heard, Campbell, right?
Yeah. All good.
Everyone, Signature Resources, an upcoming and rapidly growing Canadian gold exploration firm. Since our joining, myself and Paulo around the same time in November 2020, we've accomplished a lot, and I'll just list it and before we go into a brief overview of who and where we are and what we're doing today. But since joining in 2020, we've done a lot to take a 7 million market cap company that was 2 million in debt, no cash. We raised about 3 million in cash, eliminated the debt, and began to move the share price quite rapidly higher into and above the 10-cent mark, into 15 cents around March of this year. After raising that 3 million in December, we moved into the new year this year, starting this year, prepping and setting up our exploration camp. From that, we've initiated and completed a winter-spring drilling program of a small drill program of 3,200 meters, of which those results were released, and I'll speak to later, but we're definitely excited about that. From there, we've raised an aggregate in 2021 of about 5.5 million, 1.5 from a placement from Crescat that was announced earlier in the year. That was around March of this year. And we've just recently announced the closing of an oversubscribed raise of about 3.9 million. Those funds, of course, are moving now into fueling us for the next stage, which is a substantively upscaled drill program that will be around 10,000 meters, targeting the deeper extensions and eastern extents of our resource, as well as continuing to probe the western extents that we just completed drilling. As well, that will be done by 2 of our own drill rigs, which we now hold, as well as an upscale crew and project camp facility. So all of that is happening, as well as in parallel with several geologic programs collecting geophysical data that's really going to help us zero in on the next round of drilling in terms of precision and targeting. That includes a 3D IP, airborne geophysical surveys. We've just completed an airborne LiDAR. So a lot of things happening through this summer to prepare us for this next upscale round of drilling that'll commence in towards the end of Q3 of this year, something we're excited about. Moving forward then, looking at our presentation, of course, forward-looking statements, which you're all familiar with. I encourage you to read that. This presentation is on our website. Just a quick overview then of what we have in terms of the asset. We hold presently an historical resource of about 234,000 ounces, grading just under 7 grams. That is a historical resource that was discovered, of course, back in the late 40s, around the time that most of Timmins and Kirkland Lake and even Red Lake were being discovered as well. This was no exception. It was happening. There is a shaft installed with 3 sublevels. Over 28,000 meters of drilling was completed over those from that start point to today. And as well, we've since expanded our land package now to be just under 300 square kilometers, or over 32 kilometers in strike length east-west. It's a massive land package that holds nearly 90% now of the entire Lingman Lake greenstone belt, a pristine elephant country, if you will, for gold discovery, and right in the middle of that is our Lingman Lake discovery. So we are progressing, as I've just outlined, this summer towards a 10,000 meter program to start towards the end of Q3. Of course, the ultimate goal here is to establish a maiden 43101 compliant resource sometime in 2022. We are working with Nordman Engineering to have that historical resource converted into modern compliance, as well as with the addition of all this new drilling that we're doing. So that's the overview. Where we are located in northwestern Ontario, as you can see here. It's important to point out right now that we are a little delayed, with about a week delayed with being on the ground because of the intense smoke that's in this region due to many of the wildfires that are in southwestern Ontario, as well as Saskatchewan, and as many of you probably know already, in BC and down into the US and northern US states. So it's a really bad time right now for wildfires this summer. And of course, with that amount of smoke flying around, it's safer for us to remove our people right now, which we've done, and wait for the smoke to clear. But with that, we'll be getting back in over the next, say, 5 to 7 days once that smoke clears, and continue onwards with our efforts that are in full swing. Beyond that, looking closer, of course, we are in that elephant country. We're north of the Red Lake mining camp, as you can see here. The closest property to us is Monument Bay to the north, about 80 to 100 kilometers. And our nearest producing neighbors to the southwest, the Musselwhite Mine. Of course, you can see Timmins, Kirkland Lake down here, where over 200 million ounces have been pulled. This entire Abitibi belt is certainly a very prolific Tier 1 gold address, and we're quite excited to be one of the largest landholders in this address. Infrastructure, we're surrounded by it, and surrounded by expanding infrastructure, which is the key. The yellow lines indicate existing permanent roads, permanent power. The red line indicates permanent power all the way to the Red Sucker Lake First Nation, which is our nearest neighbor, next to Sachiko Lake First Nation. You can see we're surrounded by modern airports that are there as well. Of course, under non-COVID conditions, non-smoke conditions, you would see daily flights to the major cities from here as well. So excellent air infrastructure. We are fly in at our site. There is a massive lake, Lingman Lake, ergo the name of our project, right at our site. So we have excellent access in and out. There's a permanent road under the works right now, denoted by the red line as well, where the permanent power is. So we will have permanent all-season roads all the way to the Red Sucker Lake First Nation. On the eastern side in Ontario, permanent power and roads all the way to Pickle Lake. Right now, they are pushing the high tension, high voltage power north, donated, shown by this light blue line, up into the northern region, inclusive of the Sachiko Lake First Nation, which is only 40 kilometers due east of us. So in about 2 to 3 years, we'll be completely surrounded by what will likely be permanent roads. We'll have permanent power there, high tension power. So that will bode very well for the next stage of development of the Lingman Lake project and projects that we expect to add to it through further discovery and move into that next phase of engineering study. So well placed in terms of infrastructure. Moving forward from that, our land package, as I mentioned, is massive. We have expanded this considerably. The purple patented claims you see here, the smallest box is where the Lingman Lake deposit is. That's the known, that's where 80% of our efforts are taking place. This is where we are presently drilling, and we'll be drilling in the fall. However, we are expanding our efforts, as I mentioned earlier, throughout this entire claim package, running airborne geophysics. We're sending teams out this summer to look at various high probability drill test targets to do surface work, surface sampling, geochem, and these sorts of things ahead of targeting drilling in those zones, likely by the spring of next year. Moving forward from there, you know, if we zoom in on that small purple area that you saw here, this is where the camp and the historical resource is located. There's that Lingman Lake I mentioned, just about 900 meters south. So excellent access. As you can see, this land around here is very well situated for exploration. The gray you see peppered throughout, that is bedrock exposed, so the ground is reasonably flat. It's plenty of water, and as you can see, it's a typical boreal forest kind of situation there. Moving more closely, we can see, okay, this is where the historical resource is on the right side of your screen, or east of this blue diabase dike post mineralization feature. This is where the 234,000 ounces are, inclusive of this little bit of this west zone that we were test drilling in the spring. We just discovered a defined gold corridor now, moving in a particular direction to depth and strike. We're excited about. But these red zones, these red lines you see, those denote the gold zones that have been discovered so far. They range anywhere from 2 to 20 meters thick, so it's quite robust, it's quite linear, very steeply dipping. You also see that these are closely associated with this mineral package, this QFP, quartz feldspar porphyry package, that we're noticing as sort of an indicator of where the richest parts of the discovery is. And you can see to the north, we've discovered another package of that, but it hasn't been drilled. So part of our fall drilling will be probing this, as well as the IP program we're running right now, which is about 70% complete. That IP program is designed to basically look underground and light up the iron-rich mineralization that we know is associated with this, to help, of course, be more precise with our drilling and more rapid expansion of the resource. But we hope as well for it to indicate where and what's happening north and south and around this. That IP program will be running 500 meters depth to a east-west strike of 3 kilometers and north-south of 1 kilometer. So it's a massive data package that we'll have encompassing this entire deposit. So we're quite excited about that. Looking underground now briefly, you can see this is really the totality of what we have and what we're working with. It's an incredible discovery. Of course, the zones that I mentioned that were denoted in red from that plan view, you can see here these colored zones, 2 to 20 meters thick. The drilling through these black lines, it's just pin cushioned with the drilling to 28,000 meters of drilling. To the west, you can see here this purple west zone, we call it, that was discovered historically and that we've just recently expanded. And we continue to probe as well south of that to determine what's happening over here. Of course, the IP program, as I mentioned, we're running, will be a massive asset to help unlock what's happening over here. But nevertheless, to the east here is where we'll be pushing this resource to depth, as well as on strike, and probing the openness of it to the south and to the north that I mentioned just a short moment ago. Here you'll note that the underground workings that do exist, shaft 3 sublevels. It's interesting to note from these sublevels, historically there were 4 500-pound bulk samples extracted, and those all graded an average of 19 grams per ton. So that sort of data set, along with this red line you see, that is a vertical raise that was developed about 100 feet in height and about a yard or 3 feet in diameter. It itself graded 28 grams per ton along its entire length. So you start adding that together with of course the drill results and so forth. It indicates a richness to this deposit that is certainly beyond what that historical 1980s resource is indicating at just under 7 grams. So we are excited about unlocking that for sure. This is really a slide, geological slide, that shows you in a slice. There's that shaft and sublevel, north to the right, south to the left. The association of these gold, these are the zones with this quartz feldspar porphyry mineralization that you see here. It's certainly consistent, and we see to the north that there's a pretty strong opportunity to expand it further. But certainly noting scale here, this is a mesothermal deposit. We know these run for kilometers deep. Scale is certainly significant. The fact that we're only at about 200, 180 meters depth is a thumbnail thickness of where we're going with this. That's why we're excited to get going in the fall with expanding this to depth as well as on strike to demonstrate exactly that this is something we expect to have significant scale. And when you compare that to existing deposits already surrounding us in this region, such as the Red Lake Mine, the Pure Gold asset, our nearest neighbor, Musselwhite, all have already been defined kilometers deep, of course, with their resources, all mesothermal deposits. And of course, Lingman is no exception. The fact that ours is right at surface with 250,000 ounces already, or just under, it's significant, you know, to have this opportunity, this drill-ready opportunity in front of us. That is why we're putting every effort into expanding our efforts to drill as much as we can in terms of rate of growth, as well as expanding the extents of this for scale to depth, as well as on strike in the various directions. In 2018, before our arrival, our predecessors had worked to validate the historic resource, and so they drilled 22 twin holes in the heart of the current discovery, as well as reassayed many of the historic core samples, and all of that came back correlating 94% or greater. So that checked a big box for my diligence, and certainly Paulo's looking through this, and as well with the independent geologists that were working with us at the time, to indicate that, you know, this is a strong data set that we have in hand. Interesting though, the 22 twin holes that were drilled all graded the same, if not and mostly better than the holes they were twinning. So that was a wake-up call for us as well when we went through that data to see that. And you can see some of these intercepts here color-coded to match the previous 3D that you saw. It's just incredibly strong in terms of the widths and the grades that we're seeing consistently across the entire known mineralization that's near surface. I mentioned the bulk samples at 19 grams per ton. I mentioned that vent raise at 28. What I haven't mentioned is that they also drilled what they call a deep hole. It's only down to 240 meters, just below the existing shaft, where we will be starting to drill in the fall. There, an intercept of 325 grams over 1.5 meters was obtained, and of course it's certainly screaming at us that this deposit is wanting to be drilled and drilled out as we're planning to do. So that's certainly exciting. As you can see here, this is where most of the twin hole drilling was done. This slide here indicates where, and it's really a sample set that was randomly picked to demonstrate that the high grade nature of this discovery is pervasive along the entire known mineralization from the drilling that we did in just this spring, of course, and winter, had some significant intercepts as well in terms of grade, indicating that that high grade is persisting. But more than that, our data to the west indicated that we have a pretty defined gold corridor, or a zone, if you will, that we can begin to be more precise in drilling. But nevertheless, the high grade of this is not localized in any one zone or pod or something. It's pervasive across the known mineralization, direct from surface. So that checks a big box in terms of a world-class deposit and a characteristic of it. From that, I mentioned where that deep hole was drilled. Not really deep, but that's where we're going to be drilling next. The high-grade intercept, of course, at 325 grams over 1.5 meters. The west zone that I mentioned here, that was historically discovered and that we've recently expanded. Some of the intercepts that were done, particularly in 2018, I just want to look at just very quickly, just to indicate the consistent nature of the mineralization of this deposit in general. It's not, jumbled up with different types of rock types and difficult sort of mining conditions. This is very consistent mineralization, very consistent, competent rock. As you can see, just visually, it's very consistent. And over this intercept is about 12 grams over about 10 meters, which I'm rounding to. You can see how that mineralization is grading. It's very consistent, high grade, aspects to it, and that is essentially a great example of how the entire deposit looks. It's very consistent. So if I put my mine engineering hat back on, that speaks to low mining dilution, speaks to wider mining zones, which means lower operating costs, as I mentioned, lower dilution as well. And it's because of its steeply dipping nature and thickness, it just lends itself to ideal mining conditions. And of course, this is directly at surface, so it speaks to likely starter pit and underground opportunity, which in itself defines a likely high rate of return project. So again, that checks a number of boxes in terms of those world-class characteristics that we look for. Coming back on surface, of course, you can see this is where we've drilled to the west zone. And as I mentioned, we managed to define a corridor of gold mineralization here. That's trending to the southwest at depth. Of course, with the IP program I mentioned that is taking in all of this area, we expect to really light up and have a much better understanding of what's happening here, so that when we put our second drill on this, that will be much more precise and targeted in terms of hitting zones and adding ounces quickly. That will, of course, be in parallel with another rig on top of this eastern historical section, driving this to depth, as well as north and south and east probing. So lots of activity there. Just, I guess, coming out full circle, thinking about what is happening regionally. I already mentioned that we've flown LiDAR on all of this. We expanded this land package, as you can see now, to take in, and why it's shaped the way it is, to take in this amoeba-shaped Lingman Lake Greenstone Belt. This is the Greenstone Belt that I was referring to at the start. If you're not familiar with it, greenstone geologic environments are well-known, well-established regions where you expect to find world-class gold deposition. This certainly is shaping up to be no exception to that. The majority of what you'd expect to see and find is at the margins, this edge denoted between the green and this peach color. And you can see why we've expanded our land package to take over 90% of that in. The Lingman Lake deposit, you can see, is exactly where you would expect it to be, and the geologists expect it to be from a textbook perspective. It's right at that margin, right at the inflection point, the bend, if you will, where you expect to see reduction in pressure from those fluids that historically came up through and deposited the gold. Well, you can see the amount of deflection we have here is just incredible. So our geologists are very excited about this. Plus, it's important to point out this gray area that you see here throughout. that represents as well an aspect of greenstone geologic environments. These are the sedimentary packages. Where you have sedimentary packages, where you have as well regional faulting beneath that, as basically presenting corridors or avenues for those fluids to travel. When those fluids intersect these sedimentary packages, that's where they, release into this environment, and where you'd expect to find disseminated gold deposition. I point to the Temiskaming sediments in and around Timmins. Exact same situation. That's where the Dome mine was discovered and then presented over 17 million ounces. As well, further to the east, you find areas like Detour Mine and so forth that as well present not quite sedimentary locations, but they are disseminated large gold deposits. So we have all of that in terms of potential within this land package, and that is why that, combined with the knowledge we have that you see on the screen here, this was the original land package when I arrived, and that we've since expanded. But you can see how they flew the airborne geophysics over this, and how it lit up like a Christmas tree, exactly where you'd expect. These blue lines indicate the regional faults. There, that purple box here is Lingman Lake, of course, taking in our deposit, but you can see how those faults are intersecting there, how this is right on that margin denoted by the red solid line. But as well, you see other areas that are lit up significantly, particularly down where these sedimentary packages were, where I mentioned just previously, that are overlaid on these blue faults. And of course, beneath that, you can see how the geophysics is screaming at us to look at this more closely. In particular, target number 2 here actually had historic surface work done, and those results indicated a significant anomalous feature here. Our team is moving out there shortly, actually this month, to begin our own surface sampling in preparation for spring test drilling out here. And already you can see this is in an ideal location. This intersection of several regional faults. It's at a significant deflection of that margin. So in other words, what we have just from the 2018 data alone is significant for expansion. And when you look at the scale of this, and the fact we are going to be completing this airborne geophysics in August, it indicates that we have a land package that rivals anything in Canada in terms of a single company owning this much land in this kind of gold deposition geologic region. It's just incredible. And by the way, if I was to take this geophysics and superimpose it over the Timmins-Kirkland Lake region, it would look almost identical in terms of the margin, the contact, the regional faults. They call them the breaks. You may have heard of the Cadillac break that's yielded many mines, many millions of ounces. We have the exact same geology here. So we are very excited to be pushing our regional exploration program in parallel with our Lingman Lake drilling program. Of course, the drilling program is getting the 80% lion's share of our attention, but nevertheless, we're moving 2 trains down the track to expand as rapidly as possible our opportunity for further additional discoveries, if you will, here. Right now, valuations are such that, about $100 per ounce, give or take. Of course, we're looking at anything between 2 and 5 million ounces at the Lingman Lake deposit alone, based on what we know and the scale and so forth, an opportunity to grow that. So that certainly speaks to a 200 to 500 million market cap just off the Lingman Lake alone, the discovery that we currently have. Any further discoveries or additions, of course, would add factors to that. So it speaks to significant value growth for us over the next 12 months is what we're expecting and certainly focused on to achieve as a firm. Since our joining, of course, significant growth in shares, share price, and so forth, delivering significant value so far to shareholders. We have focused very much on our team and the quality of the team. We basically covered a fully cross-functional group of individuals, ranging from, of course, the geology right through to the technical, the engineering, the site development, and capital markets and so forth. And of course, with that, we are working to bolster our board as well. We are in the process of doing that, moving that into a majority independent board with very notable industry individuals as well. So a lot of things happening on all fronts within Signature right now in preparation and positioning for the next stage of significant growth and what we expect to be significant growth. I'll leave off here by stating, and then opening the floor to some questions, that so far we've done everything we set out to do, that we said we would do, and essentially when we said we'd do it, from our financial restructuring to establishing the exploration camp, completing a startup drill program, adding value from that, raising further funds, positioning for an expansion of those efforts to accelerate the delivery of value to shareholders. So we are very much on course. As I mentioned at the start, though, Mother Nature is pushing back a bit with the wildfires and smoke, but we all know that that is a temporary situation that we're working through, and pretty much most of Canada and northern US as well. But with that, we are very much on course to begin the next phase. Campbell?
Yes. You ready?
Yes.
Okay. Can you go through the land tenure outside of the original ground? What is the annual holding cost?
Annual holding cost is approximately right now just over 100,000. That is sort of staggered across on an annual basis, mostly because in Canada you are able to apply costs that are in one group of claims to the rest of the claims you hold as well. Because of COVID, there's been an extension on that as well, which pushes out an additional year for landholders in Canada. The requirements to have that distribution of cost applied to your claims that you hold, to continue to hold those claims. But that's on average what it's costing us right now.
Can you go through the drill budget for the rest of the year? Have you done flow through, or will you?
We have been doing flow through since we've joined. The most recent raise that we've completed, that has seen essentially, I'd say it's about just about 50-50 flow through to non-flow through shares out of that 4 million. Our budget for this year, we are targeting at 10,000 meters and a direct drill cost of about $250 per meter, around $2.5 million to complete the 10,000 meters, although adding some contingency costs to that would round that up to about 3 million, inclusive of the expansion of the camp and of course the second drill. So that's approximately where our budget is, and it should be noted that with the money that we have raised, with what we have in hand, with what we've budgeted and what we're planning to do, we also plan to end this year in a cash prudent situation where we will be reasonably and well positioned to enter into 2022, before we begin looking at any additional financing. So we plan to finish the year not only well positioned in terms of completing 10,000 meters, but also from a cash position and budgeting.
Okay. During the recent capital raise, what was the rate of insider participation in these raises, and any new big funds to the roster?
Yeah, there has been some additions. Maybe I'll ask our chairman, Paulo, to speak to that one. Paulo?
Yeah, so I would say that the majority of this most recent raise was a function of the funds participation. There was some retail additions, but most of it was the funds that were outlined in the press release. In every single raise that we've done, there's been heavy participation from insiders. I don't think this most recent one had participation, but that was just a function of how much was put in leading up to this most recent one.
Okay. Could you elaborate on the capital structure of the company to include fully diluted shares?
I'll kick it off. Paulo, maybe you can add. We have fully diluted prior to this financing was around 300 million fully diluted. Right now, we're probably at about 325 million fully diluted post this raise. Paulo?
Yeah, we'd have to update the table. That's a fully diluted number. Keep in mind, in terms of options and warrants, I think there's over 80 million. So you can almost reduce that number by 80 million in terms of options and warrants. We're expecting approximately $3 million worth of hard dollar warrant exercise this year and approximately $3 million of hard warrant exercise next year. So if Mother Nature cooperates, which, you know, we're starting to get some good signs from the first phase of drilling that we've done, and, you know, notwithstanding the smoke that's been in the region, you know, this upcoming 3D IP survey is going to help vector in. We should be in a position to have the stock perform in lockstep with some of those results in the second half of this year.
Yeah, and if I can add to that, you know, the warrant exercise that Paulo spoke of, those 80 million, it's actually more like 73 million right now outstanding. They've been exercising regularly since March, and essentially offsetting our G&A with what's been exercising. That the majority of those shares are expiring, as Paulo mentioned, half this year, half next. So that's going to go a long way to flushing out that and bringing in hard dollars as well that we anticipate. It's important to note too that, you know, we didn't inherit, we did inherit not an ideal capital structure, if you will, and everything that we've done since then has been prudent towards moving that to an ideal capital structure, starting with the raise, the financings, the successive increase in pricing for those. You know, finishing our oversubscribed raise just recently at 16 cents hard dollar, 16.5 flow through. As well, we had voted upon successfully at our AGM at start of March a 5-to-1 rollback in our shares. That is a tool, of course, that's sitting on the shelf now that we can further consider as we move forward and look towards optimizing our capital structure in terms of attracting more institutional attention, perhaps listing on additional exchanges and so forth. So I have a number of options on the table that we are continuing to look at and strategize over. So paying attention and working towards ideal capital structure is certainly something, as you can see, that we're demonstrating we're doing.
All right, thank you. Pass it over to Adam Graff, Senior Analyst. And
okay.
There you go.
Can you hear me now? Great. Switching from capital structure to maybe some technical stuff. The old underground, is that accessible or rehabable to get down there to do some exploration drilling?
First part, no, it's flooded. It's not accessible right now. It is, as I mentioned earlier, in very competent ground. So yes, technically that can be dewatered, reconditioned for access to modern Canadian mining safety underground standards, bolting, screening, these sorts of things. So the short answer is yes, we can get down there. That is not our focus at the moment. That would probably come into play post resource definition, which we're focused on, and growth. But moving into that next engineering phase where you'd want to get down underground, start drilling from underground, you know, working sort of that avenue of things, that would be the next phase. The fact that it's developed, that represents in today's dollars millions of dollars of expenditure. So it is an asset that we do hold, and it's interesting that you point that out, because we are glad that we have that, let's say, not only for the data sets that's been taken from it, as I mentioned, the bulk sampling, but also the future value of it.
Rob, can I jump in as well?
Pardon me?
Can I jump
Go ahead,
in as
Paulo.
well?
Please,
Yeah?
Paulo. Yes.
Okay. So it's important, and it's a great question, Adam, so I don't want to distract from it, but it's important to make sure that we're approaching this exploration from a 40,000 foot level. This is part of the reason why Crescats come in, is because they're looking at this more holistically. Yes, we're focused on trying to move the yardsticks and drive value, but we don't know where the center of gravity is yet in this camp. So that's the reason why we're doing, the regional geophysics, we're doing the 3D IP. We're basically trying to understand where the center of gravity is in the camp. But in the meantime, we're trying to drive value by defining and expanding this resource that we've started with. But the reason why Crescat's in is not just because of the Lingman Lake proper, it's because of the whole camp. So if we start tying into an area where we're getting results and the resource is growing faster there's going to be a shift. We're trying to increase our share price and our value per share, our NAV per share, at the fastest rate possible. And right now, part of it is on the Lingman Lake side, but more importantly, it's taking a more holistic view, because if the data starts telling us to go look further west or south, that's where we're going to start pouring our capital.
Yeah, well said.
Yeah, absolutely understood. I guess related to that, is there a low grade halo, around the historic high grade, very much, Malartic like, where you guys could, consider, potentially putting in an open pit over, the historic resource? Is there enough low grade in between the defined, high grade resource zones?
So far, the data is indicating more discrete zones than Halo. There is low grade. We just don't know how persistent and consistent that low grade is. Certainly, we've been focused more, and historic work has been focused on the main zones, if you will. That is a composite of low to high grade, as you've just seen, that average, overall strong grades. With that, though, the plentitude and width of these zones, the fact that we've got multiple zones with significant thicknesses, in itself lends to a viable, likely viable surface starter pit situation. That would be reasonably low strip ratio, but very high grade pit.
And I guess related to that, is there the possibility of doing, a number of, of relatively shallow holes, from the surface over the resource, the existing resource, in order to perhaps define, the open pit potential, at least a shallow open pit potential, by one, defining the near surface high grade extensions of the known zones, but then also drilling in between to see how much of it is, how much in between those zones would be waste versus low grade at current gold prices.
That will happen in time, Adam. I think as we've clearly stated, our focus is scale. We're trying to find the extents of this iceberg at Lingman, let alone find other icebergs, as Paulo mentioned, throughout our regional package, which we and the plentitude of geologists we work with believe are there. Our focus, therefore, is on extending the known zones to a mineralized category, if you will, that is sufficient to demonstrate it's there, its scale, its grade. But we're not focused on infill drilling, which you're sort of indicating there in terms of getting that finer definition of what you would do with that resource. That typically and will come later. We're not focused so much on an engineering solution right now as we are as defining the resource itself, the extent of it, the scale of it, and as well the reoccurring nature of it throughout the region.
Understood, Rob. But the above the current resource is the current resource does the current resource go to surface?
Yes, it does.
Okay, and okay, so I guess I was thinking about, between the high grade zones,
Yeah.
that could be accessed, with shallow, very inexpensive drilling to almost define those in between zones, if they
Well, that's already
are.
been done, Adam. The
What
drilling has been conducted from surface. The discovery of the resource in hand is at surface, starting at surface, going down. So, and as you saw, the orientation of those drill holes moving through perpendicular multiple zones has given us a lot of data, not only what's in those zones, but
It was
what's
sampled.
between them.
It was sampled in between, as well. It was
Not
sampled in
so
between.
much. That's the thing.
Not so
That's the
much.
opportunity, at least, that we have to begin to develop that. But that speaks to infill, Adam. It doesn't speak to
Well, if you have
resource
the
growth,
if you
right?
if you have
Yeah.
the if you have the rejects, you could just sample the rejects or whatnot, or the in
We
betweens,
could, but again, that's not what our focus is right now. Our focus primarily is expanding the known mineralized zones.
Adam, to piggyback on, I know where your train of thought is here. The historic work was focused on the high grade, and there is an opportunity to look for maybe areas where you have a lot more flooding, if you will, so that you get more of a lower grade thing. On the west side, where we've been drilling in the first half of this year, the current working theory is while we've got all the structure there, the gold seems to be in a thinner package. So the current working theory is that we're probably higher up on the system on the west side versus the east, meaning there's less confining pressure, and therefore we're not getting that flooding over the entire structural package. That's the current working theory. We'll data is going to be the driving force in terms of what we're doing. So we're going to have one rig working on the west, driving to depth, and on the east, down plunge and moving down plunge on the east. That being said, though, do we understand what the north-south definition and edges of this quartz flooding is? Absolutely not. Are we looking at something that's like Detour, where we have multiple areas and we're only focused on one area and we're sitting within a big open pit? We don't know yet. We're still collecting the data. Is this something like what the guys at Wallbridge have, where you have the combination of high grade and low grade? There's a lot of different scenarios here that we've got to go and test, but we're still in the data collection phase. In addition to that, and Rob already touched on this, to the south, we've got this sedimentary package where some of these higher grade structures or potentially higher grade structures cross cut. So if the Timmins model is at play here, are we looking at a potential Malartic or dome mine scenario where we're getting that the sediments acting as a sponge and allowing for a lower grade halo to ensue? All of this is going to be a function of going from known to unknown, using the data, helping us vector, and going in. And because at the end of the day, it's shareholders' money. It's, I've put money into this company. Rob's put money into this company. Rob could be making a hell of a lot more money working at a big corporate, and he took a pay cut to come here because we believe we've got something special here. Now we got to go and do the work.
Have you
Now,
guys?
if I can add to that, Adam, it's important to point out that I've already stated that we are working with Nordman Engineering to convert the historic resource into modern 43-101 compliant. That is also a platform for us to add this new drilling, new data that Paul is speaking of, not only drilling, but other data packages, notably the IP3D. All of that combined, of course, as we progress, of course, you go through and you test through grade shelling and so forth, what you have, where the highest grade is, where the mineable extents are with assumed cutoff grades and so forth. That is all part and parcel of developing the resource estimation. And along the way, you test where these opportunities are, where the zones are, if you will, as Paulo's pointed out, where you might have some variability, where you may have wider areas, lower grades, where you have persistent high grade and so forth. It's the process you go through, but it's primarily driven by data collection. As I pointed out, the drilling we're doing is towards expanding that knowledge through expanding the resource. As we expand, of course, we roll that in and test what we have and what it's presenting as opportunities for future thoughts about extraction, which is just too early in the game to be thinking that.
Sure. Do you guys have a plan to test the sediments, surface sampling or something like that, and then follow up by trenching or something?
Yeah, as I mentioned, we're running now this summer regional teams, if you will, geology teams that are commencing surface sampling, geochem, and so forth. From that, it'll probably be followed up with some VLF and to help vector in even further from what we know are some pretty high potential areas. That will include most likely, and that's why we're flying the rest of the airborne geophysics on the entire package, is to determine where we pick our battles. Right now, you've seen about 7 targets that were identified from the 2018 data. Those 7 doesn't mean that that's our 7 priority targets. We have to finish collecting the data and then determine where we send our teams, and from that, filter out where the highest probabilities are. Inclusive of that, certainly are a couple of the zones that I've indicated earlier that are within the sedimentary packages, not only south of Lingman, but also further west towards the western extents of our claim package.
Yeah, the target 2 area actually has some polymetallics in it as well. So there's lots of stuff that's going on in this system. We just have to collect the data to understand it better.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Just real quick, guys, regarding the old operations there, what was the process flow sheet and the approximate recovery rates, and was there significant free gold pulled out of the resource?
To start, back then they didn't have well-defined flow sheets. They were just after leachable gold and go. They were targeting essentially a gold leach, a whole ore grind. Everything was actually very well done back in the 40s from the data we have. Their test work indicates a low 90s recovery at a whole ore. Out of that, there was about mid-20s free gold that certainly indicates that you'd have at least 20 to 30% potential for gravity separation. And then now whether from the data we have, which is very limited, it's a limited data set, it's not enough for us metallurgically to draw a conclusion about how you'd approach this. But certainly with the additional drilling, the additional data that we're adding, as we mentioned, it's data driven what we're doing. Towards the end of this year, post a 10,000 meter drilling, we would expect to be entering into a phase where we could start looking at early stage met test work, drawing early inferences about metallurgy. Given the persistence of pyrite here and the association of the gold with that, which is part and parcel of that opportunity to utilize the IP that I mentioned earlier. It's difficult to say whether you'd be dealing with more pyrite than less at this stage. The drilling will unlock that in terms of data. But if that's the case, then you could envision something like a float grind, and leach kind of situation. But again, it's too early to even suggest that that would be the case. But from the data that was in hand when this was discovered and moving into production, never reached production. They ran out of money, but they were literally mobbing their mill equipment in at the time in the late 40s. They were positioning for a whole ore leach, a grind leach program.
I'm sorry, they never made, they never went into production.
They did not. They were literally on the cusp of moving into production when they ran out of funds. Of course, the Lingman Lake location historically was much farther from the known infrastructure, the rail, the roads, and so forth, than Timmins and Kirkland Lake and so forth. So, and particularly at the end of World War II, they were in a situation where they simply ran out of funds, and that's why that program and its land claims were disseminated, went into private ownership, went into receivership, and was in stasis for nearly 40 years until the late 70s, early 80s, when some smaller gold exploration firms had tried to kick at that, but they too had funding problems, and then it stayed where it was until about 2013, when our founder, John Leliver, had worked with our head geologist to consolidate the claims around that discovery, and then in 2018 conduct their own work, which led us into where we are today.
Got it. So the bulk samples were done relatively recently, and they were from the development ore
No,
that
those
was
are
left on the
historic bulk
surface?
samples when there was access to the underground. So that would have been the late 40s.
Oh, that was the 40s. Okay.
It was, but the work they had done was exceptional, it was meticulous. It was specific to preparing for production in terms of certainty, knowing where the zones were and so forth. And again, they weren't so interested in presenting defined resources back then as they were at developing certainty of where they can start mining to produce. And that's not unlike the rest of Timmins and Kirkland Lake, those historic underground, shallow, high grade opportunities. So yeah, that's the history. That's really why we have such an extensive data set, but also the opportunity where this has been in stasis for so long and overlooked.
Great. Maybe I should pass it back to Campbell to see if there's any further questions from the audience members.
I have a few questions that have come in, and then we'll wrap up. What percentage of shares are owned by management and directors? Probably covered that, but tell us again.
I believe that's, Paulo, around 10%.
Yeah, between insiders, so around 9-10%, and then there's a couple of friends and family as well that bumps it up, I think, north of 10%.
Yeah.
All right. Interesting that you own your own drill rigs. How'd that happen?
By design. When our founder, John Oliver, had started to begin the process of validating the historic resource, it was just far easier and cheaper for him to acquire the drill and work with the crews that previously were owning that rig. They had done that. We had used that rig to conduct our winter spring startup drill campaign. But the fact that owning your own drill rig, particularly in present conditions where it is very difficult to source and secure drilling contractors, not only the equipment, but also the drillers, we made a conscious choice to add a second drill rig and secure our own drill teams to remove that risk off the table that many of our peers continue to deal with. And of course, we're dealing with the drillers and drill crews that are just incredible in terms of their skill sets, their experience, and so forth. So to have that added capability, but not only have the capability, but have it within the company's control, removes a lot of risk for us off the table. And it's something that we specifically elected to do, given the crazy conditions out there for sourcing drill rigs. Do you plan to bring this into production or sell it? And how much approximately how much money do you think you might need, given what you know now, to get it to a production decision, that
or
is
something that someone another
Yeah.
party could value, given what we know, not that you found something.
Our focus, understood, Campbell. Good question. Our focus, as Paula mentioned earlier, is to deliver value to our shareholders. Our focus is to grow and further add to the discovery of the land package we have. That is our focus. The subsequent stages or phases that you would go through that I've mentioned in terms of engineering phase, study phase, and then of course, if that presents well into development, is not part of our strategy right now. We're simply growing and adding discoveries to what we own, bringing that value forward to shareholders. At
So
the
go
time,
through the drill bit in some.
through the drill bit, all of this value is through the drill bit. Should we get to a point, and we expect to get to a point where over the next 18 to 24 months, let's say, develop the Lingman Lake resource, add additional discoveries, which we hope to do. At that point, of course, that's when you reevaluate and consider what your options are, what's best for the company in terms of delivering value to shareholders, and what the management's interest is as well.
And what
Can
the
I
market
add to
is.
that, Rob and Campbell?
Please, Paulo. Yeah.
So we've all seen kind of the Lassonde curve where you have discovery, then you kind of get the trough where you go into development, engineering, until you actually come out the other side and go into production. We're very much on the front end of the first wave, in our humble opinion. And if we're right about the geology, and and we think we are, we think that's going to take about $30 million and call it 2-3 years to define a resource that's going to make some of the majors sit up and take notice. That's kind of box number one. Box number two is, if we're right and there's a few more of these things around, we're going to be able to stagger a few of these Lassonde curves one on top of the other. And the mistake that most, I shouldn't say mistake, the issue that a lot of juniors, and Adam, you know this from both of our careers, is that you get these juniors, they make a discovery, they get all this fanfare, and then now what do you do, right? And then they try to bring outside consultants to kind of move through the engineering phase, and it takes a while. The really cool thing of being able to attract a guy like Rob to the team so early is that he has the experience to move it through engineering. He has the experience to put it into production. Ricardo's come on board as the COO and actually has the experience. He built Pure Gold's thing. He's done Detour. He's done Cerro Moro. Like, we're blessed in the sense that we've got the team that can handle several of these things in succession all the way to completion. That is not our goal. Our goal is to make shareholders the maximum amount of money with the least amount of risk. But believe you me, if it comes to having to move this thing into production for whatever reason, because we're not getting fair value, we've got the team in place to actually move down that path with all seriousness.
Well, quickly, just cap that off in terms of our logo: discipline, execution, integrity. Having spent 15 years with the majors in a corp dev position, combing the planet, looking for opportunities, evaluating opportunities, it is an opportunity for this company to first move through the phase of defining and discovering resources that have the utmost integrity built into it. In other words, that can stand up to scrutiny, be airtight in terms of its defense. That's a rare quality actually out there. So it's one thing that we're focused on, to not cut corners, not race through this and make assumptions. We are following the data and growing this as rapidly as possible, but with the discipline and execution that it deserves.
Great. Want to thank everyone for tuning in. Please share your feedback on your way out. And again, that session will be available in about an hour on our website and in an email. And do feel free to follow up with further questions, and I'll pass it back to Rob and Paolo to close us. Happy Monday.
Well, first of all, thank everyone. I'd like to thank everyone for participating. Thank Adam for his excellent questioning and input, and Campbell, your hosting as well. Again, we are following our logo mantra and moving through this with discipline and executing as rapidly as possible to deliver quality and value to shareholders. So look forward to more news coming out on a regular basis from us as we begin to check more boxes. You'll see further developments with our board. You'll see further developments with that IP regional data, and of course, positioning to start drilling in the fall. So it's exciting times ahead.
Indeed. Thank you, everyone. Have a good week.
Thank you. Take care.